the story. You can't answer the question either, but my first question is, what does a whaling ship captain, an Australian land surveyor for Her Majesty Queen Victoria, a grandfather of the Speaker of the U.S. House, a founder of a Weatherford bank, a protege of Alfred Nobel, and a French count have in common?
A relative.
Weatherford.
They're all dead.
Yeah.
That. No, what they have in common is they all owned this little piece of land that is abstract 1622, and that is the original abstract to the International and Grand Northern Railroad. They were given this 29.7 acres for as part of 640 acres for building 1 mile of track in Parker County. So the railroad got they got 640 acres for every mile of track that they laid. So this part of what the IG and NRR got of 640 acres was this little bitty almost triangle of 29.7 acres just right off of BB Fielder. And the stable, for you all that went out there today, we were walking right along the edge of that original land grant patent. Okay, interesting folks are there. The whaling captain, this is a schooner that had beached itself and they turned it into a tourist attraction. But this is an old whaling ship. From the era, you can see they turned it into a tourist attraction with the people lined up to go see it. But it gives you an idea of the size of a whaling ship in the late 1800s. You all probably, if you've been around Weatherford for any length of time, and you all have been over to City Greenwood Cemetery 100 times, and you've seen the Witch's Tomb. That's what it's been known as. Well, guess what? Our whaling captain, our sea captain, that's where he's buried.
Wow.
Henry Swain. And he was described as a stocky, bearded man. You could sort of think of a whaling captain like that. And his home port, where he came from, was Belfast in Maine. Why he came to Texas, I really don't know. He was the president of the Crystal Palace Flour Mill, which was just right across the railroad tracks on the right-hand side when you're going north. In fact, I've seen pictures of it. You can see the railroad tracks in front of it. So he was the president of that, quite a wheeler dealer here. He died in San Francisco, which was a long way. He had gone there for his health. I don't know why he'd go to San Francisco for his health, but anyway. Supposedly he had gone there for his health and passed away there. And you can imagine what it took to bring his body back here to be buried in City Greenwood Cemetery and build this fabulous mausoleum for that. So there's our sea captain. And oh, by the way, he owned that piece of property for a while. He was sort of an investor in land in addition to his other endeavors in here, and he owned that piece of land for a little while. Okay, our Surveyor General, another interesting character. I actually found a picture of this guy, Charles Wyborn Ligar. He was born in what is now Sri Lanka. His dad was in the military of Her Majesty, and he and his dad and his mother were in Sri Lanka where he was born. So he ended up moving to Australia, and he worked his way up to be the general surveyor for Queen Victoria. And he dealt with the Maori. He bought thousands and thousands and thousands of acres in Australia and New Zealand for the British settlers that were all coming over there. Some would say criminals, because that's what they said, a lot of them, but regardless, it was for a lot of Brits to come over there. He was the commandant for a militia, and he ended up retiring and moved back to Europe for a little while, Morocco and various and sundry places around that area of the world. And for some reason or other, he came to Parker County. And he bought 320 acres of land over in what is now basically Willow Park. And he also bought this land out here where the stable is located. And this guy is buried in Willow Springs. If you go out and find his tombstone, it says on there that he was the Surveyor General for Queen Victoria. He brought sheep to Parker County, which, when I said this to one group that I gave this presentation to, there were a bunch of ranchers and they were still, sheep. So don't mention sheep and ranchers together. They didn't like that idea. Well, he was the uncle of this young man named Harry Leister. Charles Ligar brought his daughter and his granddaughter and his nephew here to Parker County and owned that land out there where the stable was eventually built. Okay, Harry Leister. He came, like I said, he came with his daughter and granddaughter. Harry was a graduate of the Heidelberg University, which is still one of the top engineering schools in the world. And so he came here to Parker County with his uncle. Well, he ended up marrying, and some of you all probably know the Crowder family. It's been around Parker County for years and years and years and years and years. Anyway, he married Lena Crowder, and they moved to New Mexico, and their daughter Marie was born there in New Mexico. He died in New Mexico of unguent fever, and his wife and daughter moved to Parker County. Well, his daughter grows up and she marries James Wright Sr., who is the father of Speaker Jim Wright. And so he lived out on this land out here. So had it not been for this guy bringing his nephew to Parker County, we would not have had Speaker Wright born here, and we wouldn't have had the water that we have, by the way, too. That's just
Their family loves New Mexico. And when Jim and his first wife were married, they went to this little area outside of Santa Fe, the little tourist course. And then his sister moved to New Mexico, and his daughter Ginger has a home in Santa Fe. They love New Mexico, so
Yeah.
I never did know what the connection is.
Well, that's because her great-grandparents were from there.
New Mexico, yeah.
Or her great-grandmother was from there, yeah.
Mhm.
So,
A lot of history.
next guy. All of y'all, if you've been around Parker County for any length of time, you've probably heard of the Milliken family. Sam Milliken, as he looks like it, was a very successful businessman in Parker County, and he bought the land from Mr. Ligar. And he was during the Civil War, he was, right before the Civil War is when he came here. But after the Civil War, he got appointed as the district clerk and then the county clerk. And then he founded the Weatherford National Bank, and he was a mayor, and he was also, interestingly enough, an officer in the Franco-Texan Land Company, which is where a lot of people's money came from, was that Franco-Texan Land Company. So he was a businessman who bought that land out there. He was also worked with Hiram Swain, and the way the properties worked, I could never find a sale by Hiram Swain. So I think he kind of traded the land or gave Milliken the right to sell the land in relation for something probably with the flour mill and him being president and the ownership of other things in here. So I never could find a direct deed, but Milliken sold the land, so I know he had it somehow. Okay, the protege. This is another, this is not Alfred Hammond. This is his stepfather. I could not find a picture of Alfred Hammond. I wish I could. His full name is Alfred Hammond de Bussy, and he was an art student protege of Alfred Nobel. Yes, he of the prize. And once again, how in the world he got here, or why he came here, I'm not quite sure. But he came with Paul Paquette Dubélé. There's a Dubélé Street that we call it here. And if you go out North Main, where the other French stable used to be until just about 4 months ago, at the top of the hill up there was where Dubelé's home was. He bragged that he was 70 feet above the courthouse. He had the first telephone in Weatherford, and he was apparently quite a wheeler dealer in the Franco-Texan Land Company, because they sent George Levy over here to look over his shoulder with what he was doing here. Well, Alfred Hammond de Lucine, by the way, he dropped, the reason that's in parentheses is because he dropped the name because he got tired of people asking him how to spell it. So he just became Alfred Hammond. He and his wife are buried in City Greenwood Cemetery, and if you go find his tombstone, de Lucine is in parentheses on both him and his wife's tombstone. He went into the ranching business, and he was sent out to I think it's the Hitson Ranch in West Texas. It turned out Levy and Milliken were friends of them, so he went out there to learn a little bit about the ranching business. And his stepfather was this gentleman right here, who was a very good friend of Alfred Nobel, which I'm sure is why his son was the protege, but I didn't realize that Nobel was an artist. But anyway, so Levy Hammonds ends up here in Parker County, and he buys this piece of land out here. Okay, so we've now got him buying the land. Well, interestingly enough, his stepfather must have known Count de Bresson, because his stepfather sends his stepson a check for $1,000, saying de Bresson is coming to town and he's gonna be bringing these thoroughbred horses here, and he needs a stable. So here's $1,000, go make it happen. So Alfred Hammond goes and buys this piece of land down here and puts a stable up on it. And 6 months later, de Bresson comes over here and Hammond sells the land and the stable to him. So that's how the count then comes into the picture here.
And he's the one that designed the stable.
Yes, I need to get into that. Shoot, thank you. Our courthouse burned in 1884, and in fact, we have some pictures down at the PCHC office that shows there are 24 stonemasons that were building the last courthouse. Off to one side, there's a guy in a dark hat and a dark coat with a sort of a jaunty guy standing next to him. And I know that there were two French brothers stonemasons who built the current courthouse. And I kind of think that those are the two brothers in that picture, just the way they're dressed and the way they look. That courthouse took 2 years to build, 1884 to 1886. They also built the Methodist Church on South Main here, and that was about 1888 to 1891, something in that time frame. Well,
Was it Sam Milliken, the contractor?
no,
Milliken.
it was, okay, when you stop and think about it, Sam Milliken was an investor. He would not really have a reason to build a stable. And all of the other people before, they were more either in the ranching business or the investing business or the land business. So they really had no reason to build more than a barn or something for cattle or even maybe for crops, I don't know. So it wasn't until the French count comes into the picture that this guy sends his son the $1,000 to buy the land and build the stable for the count's thoroughbred horses. And for those of you that saw the stable, you saw that it had those little bitty windows in it. Well, you're in Texas. You need a lot of air. You don't build a stable with little bitty windows in it. So it has a design more of a French style, of a country French style, than it does of a stable that you would build in Texas. So, but if this is the guy that essentially sent the money to his stepson to buy the stable, or to build the stable. And like I said, 6 months later, the count shows up, and Alfred Hammond sells the land to the count just a few months after he bought it, and then right after the count gets here. Well, I could not find a picture. I have written, thank goodness for Google Translate. I wish they'd respond to me now, but anyway, I found the deed where the count sells the land about 6 or 7 years later, and it has his address in France. And so I found the town, found the library that was there, and I wrote them a letter and asked them if they had anything on Count de Bresson. I haven't heard back from them yet, so I'm hoping maybe someday I can put a picture in this. But anyway, he comes into Parker County in 1889 with his thoroughbred horses. I'm guessing he probably shipped them into Galveston, and this is right after the train got here, so he could put them on a train and bring them up to to Weatherford. The train came here in 1880. So 9 years later, he could ship horses either from New Orleans or from Galveston to Parker County. And I even got the name of his horse, two of his horses, Scotland Glory 2 and Ribod. And he took him to, I found an article where he took him to the Dallas Fair in 1889, which is, I think Dallas Fair started in 1887, if I'm not mistaken. So it was right after the Dallas Fair came into being. So here we've got this French count with French thoroughbred horses taking him to the Dallas Fair. And I also found a couple of little articles where he went hunting and he had visitors from France coming over here that stayed with him for a while. So he was kind of active in this for a little bit. He apparently got tired of the business fairly early in this, and so he was back in France by 1896. He was here about a year, a little over a year. But I do have several ads from several newspapers, the old Weatherford Constitution, that show that he advertised. I mean, that's a big ad for a newspaper in this day and age. So he was advertising when to come out and see his trotting horses that he had for sale around here. The best trotters in the world, stock still unknown in the United States. And why the French? Why were they here? Oh, this guy. Oh my gosh, Charles Fremont. What an interesting character. He was a bastard son of a woman who had married a general from the Revolutionary War, quite a bit her senior. Her father had died, her mother married this guy. He took all of the family money and they were fairly well to do. And so her sister told her, if you want to live the lifestyle you're used to, you better marry this guy. Well, he was a jerk. His wife went into depression, and to get him out of her depression, he hires this French tutor to teach her how to speak French. Well, guess what? He was a charming Frenchman. They run off together, and this is their son. Interestingly enough, this was in Virginia. Interestingly enough, in Virginia at this point in time, you had to have the permission of the legislature to divorce. Don't ask me why. You had to have permission from the legislature to divorce. They refused to give him the right to divorce her. So anyway, so he ends up being a Union general in the Civil War in St. Louis area. And he marries Jessie Benton, who's the daughter of probably was the most powerful U.S. senator we've ever had. He was the man who started the manifest destiny of the United States going all the way to the Pacific Ocean. John Charles Fremont was called the Pathfinder. He was the first Republican presidential candidate. The second one was Abraham Lincoln. But this was right after he was so popular that he was nominated to be the first Republican president candidate of the United States. After the war and after all this guy made 3 fortunes and lost them in his lifetime. He could not hold on to a dime. Anyway, he talked Texas. He was French, of course. We love the French. We have a French legation. They backed our revolution. They backed our revolution. What can I say? So he talks Texas into backing bonds to build a railroad from basically Texarkana to El Paso. He didn't own the land, but he talked us into backing the bonds. So he goes to France and sells bonds on the French bourse, the stock exchange, to France, to French peasants. Well, the land was basically worthless, but he collected an awful lot, over $5 million, and the money all disappeared. Like I said, he couldn't hold. And this is 1870s. So all that money disappears, and the bondholders are left with nothing, with their certificates. And that's when George Levy steps into the picture, finds out that the bonds that the land is now worth some money, and he goes over to France, spends 3 months over there collecting all of these certificates for pennies on the dollar, comes back, converts them into land with the state of Texas. And if you go over and look at the Franco-Texan Land Company building, there's a little hump on the back of it, that's where he kept all of his papers. Interesting story, but anyway, this is a French bond. And so their dilemma was, do I sell this bonds to this guy for pennies on the dollar because they've stopped sending me my coupon payments, or do I go to Texas? There were still Indians raiding in this area of Texas. Most French people decided it was better to just sell pennies on the dollar and not come to Texas, not knowing that the land was skyrocketing in price at this point in time. But there are very few of these left. George Levy was told by one of the leading lawyers of the county that it would probably be best for him to burn everything that was in that little safe of his. And so Ms. Hammonds, it says in the book on the Franco-Texan Land Company, he took 3 wagon loads, she said wagon loads of documents outside of the city limits and set them on fire. And if you all were at there was scandal galore that went on and on and on and on and on, that involved acutment. If you all heard the program that John Forrest gave, last month?
Last month for the Friends of
Last
Shandor.
week, whatever the heck it was,
Yeah.
up at Shandor Gardens, there was a seal that was supposed to be used for all of the legal bonds. Well, the seal was lost. Well, there were all these bonds that were being bought and sold in exchange for land without seals on them, and John has the seal. So anyway, so this one is in French, and it's the bond, one of the bonds that did bring a lot of French people here, and that's why we have so many Frenchmen there. In fact, if you look through the book on Franco-Texan Land Company, they're page after page after page. The Beauforts who own the land out here, they were all part of this French companies that came over here. So you'll see a lot of French names in Parker County, and it's from the French that did decide to come get their land rather than sell their bonds. George Levy, he arrived here 1882. He was elected mayor twice of Weatherford, even though he was a French citizen. We declared him a U.S. citizen so we could elect him mayor. And so he became mayor twice, and he owned probably about 90% of the shares in the Franco-Texan Land Company. So he was a major shareholder, even though a lot of other bankers and lawyers in town made a lot of money off of this. And he returned to France a very, very, very wealthy man. And he and his wife and his daughter, he died between the world wars, and then his wife and daughter died in a concentration camp in the Second World War. So the Nazis ended up getting all the Franco-Texan Land Company properties. The ways of history.
They left Texas.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
See the first and last Jewish mayor of Weatherford?
I think so, yes, yes. First and last Jewish mayor. This is the Franco-Texan Land Company building, if you all are familiar with it, across from Venice. And there, like I said, if you go look in the back of it, you'll see the safe. In fact, you go in the building, the safe door is still there. You can still walk into the safe where the documents are kept. These are those two that I kind of think are the stonemason, the French stonemason brothers. And if those of you that went out to the building today, if you looked at how square those corners are, all the way up 22 feet, if you look at how, somebody knew what they were doing when they were cutting rock. And it's the same thing on our courthouse and on the Episcopal Church. The craftsmanship in the 1890 or 1880s of them cutting stone, somebody knew what they were
How
doing.
many workers do they have?
There are 2 dozen in this picture.
Oh, so these are all the workers? Oh.
Yeah, these are the people building the courthouse.
Okay, yeah.
That's the Carson and Lewis, where Gary Jordan building is right now, looking
This
west.
is a hotel.
Yeah, it was a hotel, the Carson and Lewis Hotel then. But I'm pretty well convinced that these French brothers, Armand and Emile Laude, were the stonemasons for the barn, because they were here during that time. And there were 70 French families here that did come over to Parker County at this point in time. And these are the two other buildings that they built. By the way, they did build other courthouses and other buildings throughout Texas, so they were pretty popular stonemasons. And then that's the barn that you all that visited out here today. Stable.
And it is a beautiful, beautiful stable, and we're saving it.
Copy. And a couple of people took the pictures of the buzzard who's nesting there right now. She's got two little eggs that she's sitting on upstairs.
And
So-
the blue owl over there is
Blue owl.
huge.
Yeah.
They're
blue
not
owl right
little.
there.
I took pictures of the eggs, so
Oh,
they're up
You can see there are 6 stable doors, and the middle door is to the staircase. It's 13-inch rises, and the steps are about yay wide, so Mark was
and they slant
very
down.
carefully.
Mark, what was
Uh,
that?
Away.
It was just empty, pretty much empty and disgusting, very a lot, just leftover hay, and then the nest is not really a nest, the eggs were just on the
Sitting on
floor
the
there.
boards.
How big were the eggs?
They're pretty good size, I wish I could send this picture.
Show them with your hand, how big
A
they were.
little, I'd say they were a little larger than a hen's eggs.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very big.
It's a big bird.
Yeah, it is.
No, they're not very big.
No.
They're kind of, one of them was really spotted and one of them had spots on it, but not as much. Can I send this to you and you can put it in your wanted these pictures? Have you got plenty of pictures?
I'm not sure I wanna advertise that too much at this
No.
point. I don't want a bunch of people running over
Well, after
and scaring the buzzards, so. But anyway, so,
If anybody wants to see what's upstairs, I got.
as I started off saying, I did get the school to agree for a registered Texas Historical Landmark, application for that, which is off to the state right now. And I'm currently working on how to go about raising the money to restore the building. I'm not exactly sure how all it's gonna work out, so TBD on what is happening with that. But I do hope to restore it. And like I said, the school right now, the administration is been very supportive of this, so I'm hoping for success in that. And that's my story.
Boy, I had the
Thank you, that was wonderful.
I had the college kids